You know, if you're a teacher, if you're an educator, if you're a college professor or a kindergarten teacher, you are a leader. You're a leader because, by definition, leadership is influence, nothing more and nothing less. And if you're standing in the front of the classroom or sitting around a project table or sitting around a mastermind group table, and you're the one providing the basic source of information from which people make decisions in their life, then you're the teacher and you're the influencer, which means you're the leader. But I also want you to know that the educator is a leader, and a good leader is also an educator. And I mean by that someone who has a profession that makes them a leader, but not necessarily a profession that makes them an educator. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast. Yesterday I binge watched several episodes of a very unusual documentary called How to Become a Tyrant. And it was really ironic that as they went through the progression of all of these tyrants, they basically laid out over the last 2 or 3 centuries those who have risen to the top of power, modern and ancient. And by that I mean all the way back probably into the middle 1800s, and then as currently as the mid 1990s. And they compared some of these tyrannical leaders, people who became dictators, people who did away with all of the things like liberties and freedoms and their voting processes, et cetera, et cetera. And the one thing that was ironically consistent among every one of them, now there were 10 or 12 rules from the Book of Rules for Tyrants that were very consistent across all of them, but the one that really stood out to me was the complete control of education and the complete control of truth. Now, it's one thing to say we're going to decide what goes in the school system or we're going to decide what's taught in the classroom. In fact, it is the reason that we have school boards. It is the reason that we have a state board of education. It is the reason that we have a state school board that basically replies to the wants and the needs of the parents in a community and also replies to the wants and needs of society as we grow. It's why we have STEM education in so many different places. It's also why we have a constant review of textbooks and looking back at what it is we teach and why do we teach that and how relevant and valid is it today. Imagine in my day in school, we didn't have all the classes on computer programming. It just wasn't as big a deal because it wasn't as accessible. We also had no classes on anything called social media. But as we look today at the needs of our society, at the needs of employees and employers and who's going to be hired for what kind of job, it's obvious that it's necessary to teach things that in the past we never taught. In the past, there were kids who their entire day of education consisted of 2 or 3 hours of reading and then 7 or 8 hours in the field, learning to operate whatever the family's business was, whether that was a farm or a blacksmith or a horseshoeing business or running a grain mill. We don't have that same kind of education these days, but we do have internships as you grow older. See, the challenge with all of these dictators over the course of time was that they did away with anything that might lead people to think independently. They did away with anything that might cause people to come to a conclusion differently than what they had. They did away with any kind of education or science that challenged the ideas that they firmly held. In fact, in Stalin's era of the USSR, there was a season that one gentleman who was very fond of Stalin and who Stalin was very fond of came up with a new way of farming grain, a hybrid grain. And it was supposed to be this incredibly weather-resistant, incredibly fruitful, easily multiplied way of feeding the people. And yet, during the reign of Stalin, some 50 million people starved to death. Yes, more people died of hunger in a modern country in this century than all of the pandemics combined. 50 million people. Pol Pot saw the end of more people than that. Mao saw the end of more people than that. Why? Because they reached a place where they denied the science that was, they denied the history, they denied the political sciences, they denied the social sciences. They re-educated people to believe only what they believed. And they didn't really ask the question, Is what I'm telling them true or not? They only ask the question, does it serve me? Does it keep me in power? Does it allow me to maintain control? And if you look over the course of human history, that truth has been perpetual. Oh yeah, you can go all the way back to the ancients. There was information that the Egyptians had, that the Romans had, that they simply didn't share with the average Joe citizen, because they knew that if people remained a little bit unknown, a little bit in the dark, a little bit uneducated, they were a whole lot easier to control. An educated population, an intelligent population, a thinking population is really hard to control. I want to challenge you, if you're in any kind of leadership, have you taken the time to do the research outside the realm of your industry, outside the realm of your own necessity of thinking, the things that you have to study to be good at your job? Have you taken the time to read beyond your necessity and read into your capability, into your potential? And have you taken the time to mentor that content, to educate with that content, to take that information that may seem extraneous into the lives of the people that you lead and influence? If you haven't, right now is a good time to start. When it comes to information and education, they're like trees. The best time to plant one was 25 years ago. The second best time is right now. We can't afford to see another generation of people who only receive the information that is best for the moguls, that only receive the information that is best for the elitists who want to stay in power, that only receive the information that is best for the tech oligarchies. No, we need people who are educated in all forms of social sciences and mental sciences and history and politics and economies. We need people who are willing to pick up books and read things that they don't agree with so that they can understand the thinking that led to those conclusions. Leaders educate. Educators lead. My challenging question for you today is, as a leader, as an educator, what is the source of truth and information that you draw from for the people that you lead and educate? Because that one is on you. There's an old proverb that says, don't desire to be a teacher unless you understand the conviction that's going to come along with that, the high level of accountability and responsibility that comes along with being a teacher. It's a significant burden, and you will be held accountable for what you've taught. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day. Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family,